All right. Good evening, everyone. You want to get started, Claudio?
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Geert. So, well, as it is mentioned in the agenda of this description of the agenda of this session, the idea of this session is really to give you some tips to those who are new to the industry, to those who are still students, those who are planning to start a career in the translation industry. So I think that first of all, let's have a round of introduction. I will start by introducing myself. My name is Claudio Chiavetta. I am a member of the LIND Expert Group, so the group of the European Commission representing the language industry. I'm a translator, and I've been, in the industry for more than 30 years now, as a freelance translator for 15 years, then as a sales director in the public sector for different companies, and especially now with TransPerfect. And so I'm really happy to moderate and communicate with you about this very interesting subject. So over to you here for your presentation.
Sure. Well, good evening, everybody, and glad to see you in great numbers. I see 141 people in the audience already. Very glad to see that. Indeed, my name is Geert van der Hagen. I just like Claudio, I've been a member of the Lint for some time, although I left the Lint now earlier this week because I represented the European Language Industry Association, where I was a board member for a number of years. And since I left the board, I will be replaced in that function. I am, and I will talk about that a little bit later, I'm a relatively recent hire into the industry in that I had an career in finance a quarter of a century before I bought my company, LexiTech, uh, this year, 7 years ago. Um, so, sort of what I have prepared talks a bit about this personal story, and also about some things that we see in the industry as a way of a kickoff. Do you want me to go to that, Claudia, first? And well, indeed, that's the personal story. One of the things that we will talk about is the opportunities for very young people in the industry. And many of you, I don't see you, but I suppose as you were graduates or about to graduate, you're all very young. To talk about the variability or the variance that you have within the opportunities in the industry, I will just share my personal story, which is one where I was in finance for a quarter of a century. And then I said, okay, I've done my tour. I've seen what I wanted to see in that industry. I wanted to reconnect with an ambition which I had for a very long time, actually, since I was in business school a long time ago, which is to have my own company. And after having looked at a couple of companies that I wanted to purchase, I came to this one, LexiTech, in the language industry. And the conclusions or the reasons for buying the company, which is a relatively small company all in all, but I think may be relevant here because yes, there are opportunities, and Claudia and I will talk about that. There are opportunities, of course, for your graduates as linguists, and in different parts of the industry, and the industry is sort of evolving in many directions. But hey, look at me. I came to the industry when I was 50 years old because I saw an opportunity, and that opportunity is materializing itself as an entrepreneur. Of course, there are large companies. Actually, the man who sits next to me represents a very large company in the industry. I think he represents the largest company in the industry. But as we say in Dutch, which is my mother language, the sun shines for everybody. So there is also room for smaller companies. There is room for independence. There is room for different types of careers you want to evolve or you want to develop. Of course, in the earlier part of a career, maybe you want to look around a little bit. But so there is lots of variance out there, and I think my personal story is attest to the many different ways how you can be active in that sector.
It's true here that indeed you represent a career path that is very interesting because it shows how flexibility can, give you some surprise in your career. For example, so you came from another sector, and then jumped into the translation world, I would say. My story is a little bit different, but the objective was the same. What is interesting here is to show you that being in the language industry, no matter the role that you will have, is a very enriching experience. That with a translation, interpretation, language-related degree, you really have the world that is open to you. If I consider my own personal experience, so I studied translation here in Brussels, and then I studied as a freelance translator. I was, kind of translating At that time, there was no internet. There was no with the computer was like an IBM PS1, so it was like a dinosaur time. But what was interesting, and I think it's still valid now, is to try to find one kind of a specialization, something that you think you like to do. So for my part was anything related to public sector and public sector policies. So I was really interested in any kind of policies that were that the European Commission, for example, was kind of developing. So I started specializing myself in those areas. Would be environmental policy, economic policies. So within this public sector world, I try to find like an interest, in translating something that would matter to me, and it was more like the environment. So I started working like for 15 years like this, but soon I noticed that this specialization path was also an interesting occasion to maybe try other roles within the industry. Not only being a translator, because I enjoyed my translator time, absolutely, but I think that because the university curriculum is so diverse, it was interesting to try out other stuff like the project management or even the promotion, how to promote yourself as a self-employed, as a freelancers. How do you reach out to your customer and make sure that you stand out in the competition. So this is something that interested me. So that is why after 15 years I decided to work as a language consultant to with a company, and so I started, building this business of creating relationship with the EU institutions, with the public sector organizations. So, and within this new role being more like a sales role, but still, focused on quality and on making sure that the actual production goes very well. Um, I discovered an all new world and a wealth of information and career opportunities for language specialists. And I think that I can maybe discuss this with Geert, the different type of roles that a translation company can offer that is not pure text to text translation.
That's, I think, that's really why I wanted to get to, is to say, do I work as a translator? That's one question. The other question is, where are my skills and what is my training in demand? And for that to discover, let me maybe share just a couple of minutes what my views on the industry are as a whole, just to see, well, to give at least my personal viewpoint and some color. And like everything in life, there is good and there is bad. And I'll start with the bad. And I think that in the industry, I think, has been pulled for a long time with what's been happening over the last 20 years, which is globalization. In 2001, for those who know the history a little bit, China joined the WTO. There was containers over the sea everywhere. There was international commerce that developed tremendously, and that has, of course, and high-tech companies in Germany exported to China, and China exported to Europe, etc., etc. And that has certainly helped tremendously. But that is slowing down a little bit. I mean, you look at the geopolitics, you look at what's on the front page of the papers every day today, that is sort of coming to a pause. Energy costs are rising. International commerce doesn't develop as it has over the last 20 years, and probably could not develop over the last 20 years because the growth was not sustainable. That's the not so good part. That's a slowdown. But at the same, and I see this with my own customers. I mean, my company caters mostly to SMEs, to industrial companies that produce whatever type of service and or product that they want to export all to Europe or on a worldwide basis. And you see that these people are having difficulties, and that they are working very, very hard in order to get the same result or even less of a result than they had a couple or a few years ago. The other one, of course, which is the good part, and the one that is helping us, although people say it destroys us, but it helps us, and of course that's the technology. Because the technology, on the one hand, of course, you say, it automates processes, it automates functions, but it also makes solutions and products possible that were not possible beforehand. It creates new markets. And a friend of mine who actually has an interpreting company, he always gives this example of what we all have in our pockets, which is the iPhone. And when Steve Jobs developed the iPhone with his colleagues, they were brainstorming, probably weeks in a row, and they wanted to have a camera on the front of the iPhone because they thought it would be interesting to have conversations with your face on it, which we do quite a bit. Which what they did not foresee is where everybody uses this camera is to make selfies. The technology, very accessible, allowed for something that nobody thought about. Even Steve Jobs, in all his genius, didn't think about the selfie, but a new market got created. We have had the same effect now with COVID. Lots of solutions have been used very, very intensively, which we never thought about before. What did we think that role would be of Teams and how that would develop, and how online interpreting, to use that example, would develop, how online training would develop tremendously over the last couple of years for the simple reason that people could not move or could not sit in the same room. But technology allows for that. And so you have all these situations where your skills and your training and your knowledge as a linguist is in demand, but it's not necessarily as a translator. And I think that's sort of the bridge that people need to make in order to have a view on what's going on. And that's also where, and you have this in, I come from the finance industry, as I was trained in tax law and business economics, but also quite often earlier in the career, people work for an auditing company, or if in the lawyers, they go for a big law firm. And actually the benefits that they draw from these functions is that they discovered the industry, they discovered the economic sectors, they discover how the economy really works and where the opportunities are. And then, everybody finds his way into this. But in our case, maybe much more than in the traditional sectors, the market has changed quite a bit over the last 5 years. Even in the short amount of time that I've been in the industry, which is exactly 7 years, I've seen this evolving. And that's where, the sort of, it's like, when Columbus discovered the world in a certain sense, there's new things that are being discovered and you need to draw your conclusions from that. And that is where the opportunities are nowadays. Not necessarily in the development itself or in the products itself to a certain extent. I always think that technology is boring, but what does it create? What does it bring to? How is this being used by people? How does it make their life easier? How does it create new markets that weren't there beforehand that nobody could think about? And I think that's where the big opportunity is. And you're all much younger than me. I'm probably the oldest around the table here, no matter how big it is, almost. but so that's really, I think, what I believe is new, and where you see that explosion of business, frankly. That was my 2 cents.
Yeah, and Geert, what is interesting also to discuss here, because we have no real information about the type of viewers and guests we have, so probably newcomers, because it's the whole point. But we know that when you start a career in the language industry, there is always, this traditional cleavage between I want to be a freelancer, I want to work for a company. Or I want to own my own company, but it always starts being a freelancer. Okay, so what I'm gonna try to do now is just to give you some examples and tips. What has changed over the last, let's say, maybe 10 years or 5 years in the language industry, and how actually we can be successful. Either you choose to be, yeah. Yeah, go.
Before you do that, Claudio, I see there is a chat, and maybe we need Lucas for that. If there are questions already now,
Yeah.
I think we can take them. And I think if they're relevant to what you and I are talking about, people should ask their questions. And I was of the understanding that the questions should go to the chat, but then I let Lucas intervene or control so that we're all on the same page on this. Lucas, are you there? And can you guide us as to how people should react, the reactions there are?
Absolutely. I was looking at that. Yes, people should absolutely be sending questions into the chat.
Okay.
And at the end, the slide will be mostly for a word cloud of what people took away from the session.
Okay.
So please send the questions away.
Okay. Claudio, back to you.
For the moment, no question.
No, but I want to encourage the people to
exactly. You can interrupt me with questions, because if I start, I won't stop talking. So I was saying that either you choose to be like a freelancer or to work, in a company. The language industry has evolved a little bit, and what we could say, one of word would be like specialization, and also being, focused in one or two services that you want to master. So I would say that as a freelancer, if you want to stick to that translation, because we still, most of our industry relies on freelance translator, no matter big or small you are as a company. I mean, we still rely a lot on the expertise of a linguist, which is really the DNA of our, and we should be proud of what they actually achieved. And we had this. I don't know if you probably attended the plenary with the presentation of Tetiana Struck from Ukraine, where she talked about the translation crisis. It was really fantastic. So what is important is to know what is your value and what you want to achieve, and in which area of specialization. This is very, very, very important. So as a freelancer in the translation or interpretation, you have a lot of possibilities. And most of them are not simply general translation or technical translation or life-size translation. You have an awful lot of services that you can offer, and let's say domains of expertise you can actually discover. For the moment, we feel that as companies, we are struggling a little bit, to find very good translators who are specialized in finance and legal, for example. Those two they're very old, let's say, domain of expertise, but still, we find that because the world evolves, and then with the different crises, the terminology in finance and legal also change a lot. So I mean, I think that if you want to specialize in something, it has to be something like interesting, like finance or legal, or new technology, something very very interesting. So this is from, let's say, a pure freelance translation part. If you're an interpreter or you want to become an interpreter, now the world, with the COVID situation, the world has changed completely, and more we are relying on platforms. So remote interpretation has just boomed incredibly. Live captioning, as artificial intelligence has been integrated also in the platform. So there is a new era for interpreters. How do you cope with interpreting from home remotely, having a specific equipment? So there are technicalities that needs to be absorbed by the interpreter as a linguist also. So this is, I mean, if you are an interpreter, that there is an interesting, let's say, training path with remote techniques. This is very important, and platforms, how to master those platforms. Also, and I think Geert, you can also give me your idea on this. If you want to work with a company, if you work for a company like a translation company or language company, I mean, again, you have to know that big and small translation and interpretation do not really hire internal translators. We have internal translators, of course, that are most of the time, let's say, assigned review and quality control tasks.
QA, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But the real translation work, which is of utmost importance, is relying most of the time in the hands of freelancer. And of course, if you want to work, if you want to be like not a freelancer, but there are a lot of other possibilities in bigger companies. Project management, yeah.
Maybe I was just thinking about a path that I've seen a few times already, and then we will start taking questions, Claudio, because I see there's a few of them and they look very exciting. A path that I've seen a few times already, just by way of inspiration. People who sit in my company, and maybe there's one in the audience today who was in my company until recently, Anais, if you're here, good evening. Who work, for instance, as a project manager, first of all. And there they have the venture point that when they see what the market wants, what does a company or a public sector entity, how do these needs for multilingualism, because in the end that's what it is, how do these needs arise? And if we bring that back to the client, in what sort of need does that cater for? Is that the need to be compliant with the regulations? Is it a need to convince the clients to do, or the prospects to go to the website or ask for some test of the product, or what is it exactly that gives a rise to that market? For instance, that's something that project managers discover very well, and I've seen, because it's not something that people typically do for all their careers, then afterwards, well, like the example of Claudio, either they go into sales, or for instance they become freelance translators themselves, but of course they have a much better understanding of what's going on. And that sort of ties into one of the questions that we see here, which is, do you need, maybe we should take them in reverse order, Claudio,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that
yeah.
don't we miss anything, and we want to be fair to all the people who come forward with questions, and maybe some of them will sort of deal with more or less the same issue, but we'll handle that. Is it necessary to specialize? And then that's from Mariot Piquet, and then Anna Karapchuk says, I was wondering, should we have any precautions? Or maybe we'll skip that for a moment, we'll come back, but don't specialize, or I need a few years to specialize in finance is another question by Alina Sekara. How do you do that, right? There is indeed a discussion in the market which says, oh no, you need to be a subject matter specialist, you need to be an accountant, and I do QA for some finance also, but as a finance professional. But so, do you need to be a lawyer in order to translate legal work? Do you need to have 20 years in finance to be a financial translator? No, it's about linguistic skills first of all. I mean, in an ideal world, we know this, right? You have 5 degrees and you're 25 years old and you have 10 years of experience. We all know that's humbug. We all seen that. We've all been there. In the end of the day, your specialty, your skill, what you know best is the linguistic part. And the specialty that will grow over time. And I've seen very good financial translators who are linguists first of all, but they have focused on this and they took the time to learn about it and etc. Medical device is another one that we are quite active in our company. Same thing. People took the time to go into that, to go to a webinar, to go to a seminar, to understand what's going on in that sector, maybe be member of one of the other associations, go to training. And actually in a couple of years, these people are actually pretty good and they know what's going on in that sector. And then they work for our company and also for another company. Freelancers typically don't put all their eggs in one basket. So that's from my point. I don't know whether you agree with that viewpoint.
Yeah, I agree. And I see that there are a lot of questions. I would like to go through, and maybe if someone wants to join us. But I think there is an interesting question about from Carrie Power. So because we want this to be also very practical. As you say, Carrie, this is a talk for tips for newcomers. Can you give examples of a job website that recruit translators, localizers? Yes, this is very interesting. So you have to know that most of the job related to translation, you will find them in the career section of all big interpretation and translation companies and smaller. So you have other websites like euractiv.com where you have some let's say job not only for translation but for other types of institutions. You have also the possibility to go through like the institutions to find if there is some competition. But most of the careers recruiting translators and or specific position, you will find them in the career section of those because there is no specific let's say website where they're going to be publicized, because it's still a niche. It's one of the biggest niche market in the world, translation. So this is the tips I would give you. Also, attend fairs like this, TEF, as much as possible. Try, because there are a lot of free events in the translation industry or in other industries or fairs. Go there and just meet people, interact. So this is very very important for me. An interesting question from Rosa Boch Fraga is: do you need a degree in the field you want to specialize in?
Oh.
Well, definitely not. Definitely not. As Geert was saying, what is very important is in the interest you have, but you will still need to learn. There are a long list of webinars that are free also. If, for example, you want to specialize in engineers, and you can select like some 10 companies that are active in this sector, and what you can do is educate yourself, while translating for other customers. Just subscribe to RSS feeds and make sure that you are aware of the information that is spread through those, let's say, websites, and make sure you attend webinars, you understand the subject matter expertise. So this is very important for you to educate and learn, on an ongoing basis. So there is no recipe. Even the best freelance translator, specialized, I don't know, in life science, for example, if the person does not attend regular let's say training session online, read articles about life science, they will never be as good as at the beginning when they were just very trying to develop their business. It's very important. I learn. I've been in industry for 30 years, and I learn every day. Every day, I have questions about a quote I need to send to my customer, a solution I need to
Yeah.
present, because it's never the same. So no degree needed, except maybe for if you want to be a lawyer linguist. Sometimes you need to have a degree in law,
Yeah.
but I mean it's a question of interest.
Yeah.
And
And there is a lot out there's a lot out there nowadays. I mean, again, that's the technology. It makes lots of information available. I remember in my old days, Claudia and I, when we were doing our work, we had to go to the library when we were in university and sit there all day, just with our flask of tea. Now the information is at your fingertips. But there is also things out there. Let's suppose you want to be more specialized in technology as a translator, as a linguist. Well, there's something called TECOM out there. They have lots of information as to technical writing, industry standards, Senelec, and all these things. They have lots of information out there. They do specialized webinars, etc., etc.
Yeah.
On the legal also. So there's also sub-associations there who, as a linguist, actually help you out also. So look around. Yeah, maybe there's some membership to pay. I know Lucas insisted on us not making any publicity. I will break his rule. But for instance, if you look at an association like Elia, which I represented until recently, they organize a seminar or a conference once a year just for the freelancers. So if you want to get to know translation companies, it's out there. So I'm not saying you all have to go. I think the next one is in Rome. I think we all have to go. Rome is nice, but but there's things out there. If you look around a little bit, talk with other people, talk also with your local association. There's La Chambre, here in Belgium. They have lots of information out there. And what I have found, and that was not true in my previous life, in the translation industry, people want to share. I was in the finance sector. The last thing they wanted to do was to share information, share knowledge, share contacts, whatever. I mean, everybody was completely paranoid. And here, people want to share. Every day you reach out to people, nine chances out of 10, people will pick up the phone, will want to talk with you, will share information with you. They want to help you out because, again, there is room for everybody. There's further to the point that Claudio was making, there is a high demand for translators nowadays. I know if you read in the press, they will try to convince you otherwise, but we are looking for good translators. We are transperfectists, everybody is. There is room for
now,
professionals.
Geert, I would like to because when we moderate and this kind of session, about tips for newcomers, there's always questions that are very fair that we need to that we need to answer in a very clear way.
Sure.
Those questions about the rates. So Isabella Guido asked, in Italy they are very low. The question also will take time to know the field you want to be specialized in while still being profitable. This is a piece of advice I want to give you. So I suppose I'm talking to Isabella and Sally. Maybe you're newcomers. Maybe you've just started a freelance career. Maybe you work, I don't know. But I will assume that you guys are, let's say, newcomers in the industry. It's true. The rates, compared to 20 years ago, have decreased. So the translation market has developed, globalization has developed, and there is more and more content to be translated in a quicker way. So the traditional model of having the super experienced translators, having lots of time to translate 10 pages is finished most of the time, except for some premium markets.
It's still there.
It's still there. It's still there, I agree.
But that market doesn't grow, that's for sure. The growth doesn't sit there.
Exactly. So
that's a sort of a stable package out there, yeah.
So I think in order to make a living, a decent living in the translation industry, indeed, you need to stand out a little bit, make sure you learn in an ongoing basis, but also maybe accept that the rates will not be very high at the beginning, but that you will get a secure, let's say, business. You'll have a secure work if you work with different translation companies. You don't have to stick to one, or you can work with direct customers, you can work with other companies, but the volume of work will help you at the beginning get your experience, forge your experience. This is very important because we think that it takes 1 to 3 years to be
Mhm.
experienced in one domain. For example, before I'm experienced in environmental issues, I had to translate at least 1,000 pages per year on this subject matter. So at the beginning, I struggled also as being, a young, let's say, graduate. But you need to multiply, work a lot. That's true. At the beginning, it's very difficult. You cannot compare someone started in the industry with someone with 10 years experience. The rates, of course, if you don't have the experience, you will be paid a little bit less than this is
Yeah.
for any economic sector. So
Exactly. I was about to say, if you look at lawyers, if you look at accountants, if you look at other professions, people come out of university, they have a very good theoretical background. That's what the universities provide. But then, in order to get that practical experience, the first few years or training, you say you're a trainee accountant, you're a trainee lawyer. I mean, they use other words, they say stagiaire or whatever. But in the end, that's the idea. You have to sort of come up the ropes. And that's for our industry not different economically, but in practical terms, of course, you're on your own already, right? That's a difference, because otherwise there's a stage and method de stage, etc. That model is less prevalent here, but in the end, we're all trying to do the same thing, which is make sure that people, come up the ropes. Let's make sure that we, Claudio, that we.
yeah, so I'm just
Yeah.
leaving. So there was a question again from Alina about the premium market, which is not actually
Yeah.
the point of this conversation, but indeed, what constitutes the premium market is those very niche, let's say, business sector requiring very specific translation and ready to pay a lot. It can be, some very specialized technical stuff, or it can be some highly sophisticated financial instruments. But again, it's it's difficult to start with the premium market because when you're a
Mhm.
newcomer, you're not very experienced. But you can start if you want, if you're interested in those, then it's up to you to maybe have some training. There are trainings that are free, other that you can pay for a training, and then start to build up your experience. And then maybe after 3 to 4 years, you're going
Yeah.
to be able to.
Yeah. So there was a question on sectors. Is medicine a good market? I think the sectors that are highly regulated are never a bad idea because the risk for the client to have sloppiness is just too high. They will want to pay for premium because there is some risk involved, and that's true for legal, that's true for medical, that's true for quite a few industrial sectors, all in all. And so, yeah, that's probably a good place to be.
Yes.
Now the question is, and I saw another question here, and I'm sorry, I can't see the name. Do you need a supplementary? Evgenia, I don't want to, torture your name,
Evgenia?
but Evgenia, what are the best master's degree that the student translator can do? I don't think you need another master's degree. Once you are a translator, you're a linguist, and as Claudio was describing, and then you invest your time in order to understand, what direction you want to take. That should be. I mean, you don't sort of add up degrees upon degrees upon degrees. I've done this in my time, but that was for a completely different reason. So. I don't see this as a prerequisite to be successful as a translator, frankly, if you choose a certain sector. That's just a personal opinion, right?
I think that to follow up on what Ger is saying about adding master degree in order to be let's say employable. What is important, I think, and we've worked a lot on the let's say within the Lind expert group, is when you finish your career, your diploma, it's very interesting to go for a traineeship, in companies, and maybe start, having a interesting relationship with the person you are interacting with. And this probably, in my company, for example, we have a lot of trainees that are actually hired afterwards, because I think that it's a very good complement to your studies, having like a 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, paid or unpaid, it's whatever, depending the countries you live in. But it's very, very interesting, and I think for me, it is the best way to discover what you like within this industry, what you would like to do. Maybe you start a traineeship as a translator, and then you discuss with a project manager, discuss with a software engineer, discuss with an e-learning specialist, and then you said, wow, this is what I want to do. So then you start, being interested. So this is the only thing I want to focus on and insist on, is the flexibility of changing, within the same industry, changing roles, and make sure that you're interested in something and you work. We were referring to, do I have enjoyment when I'm doing my work during the previous. This is very important. So traineeship are a very good option.
But I wasn't really sure I understood the question. So maybe she could come online and talk
Yeah.
about what she wants to head at. That might be a big idea.
Am I supposed to do this?
So how can I showcase experience that I've gained while working in areas that don't spell out translation?
Okay, sorry, I'm having issue here with trying to plug. That's very strange.
Until Rika comes online, found it I think we covered it. Literary translation, frankly, I'm not the right person to talk about this, as I don't really know what it is. As I do in, or I don't do actually in public sector. What I do know about public sector is that they typically work through RFPs, where pricing is a very important. Oh, I'm saying all these wonderful things and I'm on mute. So, go back. So public sector, I have a little insight in. This is not something that we do very much at Lexitech. What I do know, though, is that they typically buy via RFPs, and they have a high focus. I have to be careful here that when I set up a mission that they don't hit me. But at the pricing model is very much geared towards pricing quite often. I mean, this is public. You want to be careful.
Sorry, there was an issue. You were muted again.
Yeah. Can I go now?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was just saying that for public sector, and I think that's a bit the main drawback you will have there. Pricing is always a very important issue or an element in the evaluation of the files, and so for whatever I know of it, which is not an awful lot, it looks very difficult to me to combine a perception of quality, or quality all in all, with a very high quality with a purchasing model which is very much geared towards price. When you see an RFP from public sector, you say, oh, it's 60% on price, it's 50% on price. So that is not for the absolute premium that you would find in medical, for instance, where people will say, okay, well, pricing is of secondary order.
Sorry, do you hear me?
I do.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So because I have a problem, I can't plug my computer battery because there is no. Sorry. If someone can bring me like une rallonge, it would be good. Because my computer will stop working. So there's an interesting question about post-editing from Anna Karabchuk. Is post-editing gaining importance? Absolutely. This is very interesting because we use translator, we assign tasks to translators that are post-editing tasks. So it's not the same way as reviewing. So because you need to know that this comes from machine translation. So there is a way of post-editing. So, and especially with the neural machine translation, which is the new standard, there is a way of let's say post-editing that is a little bit different. So definitely, our customers are also asking for machine translation because they have a large amount of internal document that they need to process, and so they are quality. They say, well, the quality needs to be good, but it doesn't have to be a human quality 100%. So we agree on this. It's not only a production model, is a sales model also for the customer. The customers, for example, in the legal, when they have really big files to be translated in a case, they will ask us to use machine translation with a human post edition. So indeed, I encourage those who are interested in this, who are more tech savvy, to have some training in post edition, because it's true that there are a lot of opportunities, and we let's say we have a lot of work involving machine translation, definitely.
I think it goes back to the point that we both that we made, or that we tried to make at the very beginning, which is make a distinction between, do I translate, or my skills as a linguist in demand? And that's something, a bridge that people sometimes have difficulty in jumping. They say, oh, this is not the translation as we, in a classical way understand it. However, and post-editing, for instance, which is focusing just on precision, less so on lost style, for instance, is one where, the skills still in demand without having the classical definition. So and indeed, if you want to invest yourself in the technology side of this, but also in the operational side of this, because there is some intricacies also as to how to do it well, what is important, what isn't, etc., in order to optimize this, and also to work with these machines themselves and to see how engines can be optimized and what is important and what isn't, and how big your corpus is, etc., It's a wonderful field, which is not only about technology, but it's a lot about linguistics. Again, it's something not so classical, but the opportunity is huge. Absolutely.
Linda Orak, you have a question about literary translator. I mean, if you are into literary translation, go for it. Just go for it. If it's what you like, you will find. Maybe you will start working in cultural translation. You will manage to find a way of living, through it. So, sorry, just a question. No, actually, I can't plug it. Can you just take over a little bit because I have a problem? My computer will run out of. You see, I can't because of this. La prise de terre.
Okay, what we will do then, Claudio, we will take out our. We can both sit on my computer. I'll take out my my headphone, and then we'll do it. We'll do it from mine because we sat next to each other anyway.
This is the problem. So we find a technical problem.
Let me see.
Yeah, I think that going from one computer might be the best way for start.
Yes.
Attends. Okay. Do you folks hear me?
I can hear you. There's a bit more noise than before, but
okay. Okay. Well then, does it work?
Plug this in because I can't find you.
That's
Okay, try to use this. Does it fit? Just.
I don't think that is connected to the battery, frankly, but.
No. Sorry for everyone. Technical issues happen.
No, it's,
This one. Plug this in.
that's the problem with linguists. They're never very good at technology, so.
I heard the chuckle. Yeah.
No,
Just no. Doesn't work.
Okay. Okay.
The other side.
Claudio.
Je viens ici.
Okay. Luckily, we were sitting next to each other here in very cozily, and we can just continue in that way.
Is it okay? Do you hear us?
It's great. A bit of echo, but it will work.
Okay.
So sorry about this, but we were talking about literary translation at one. Actually, when I was a student, when I graduated, my memoir, my thesis was about literary translation. But I mean, what I can, let's say, recommend to, was it, I don't remember the name, was it Linda, is, I mean, if you really are into this, you will find maybe a possibility to work as subtitlers, for let's say the audiovisual sector, the entertainment sector. Mm-hmm. It's something that is related, not literary, and then on the side, do your literary work and try to find a solution and try to find, let's say good companies like editing companies. I mean, this is bookshops or whatever.
Absolutely, and there's huge. I mean, if you look at the volume, I'm an inveterate reader myself, also of fiction, which is quite uncommon for an ex-banker. But hey, there you go. So if you see what content is out there. This is a huge market anyway. I mean, look how many novels are being published every week, almost every day. Go to what is it here? A bit further down the street here.
Filigrane.
Filigrane. I mean, it's huge, and it's always new. I mean, I go there like every month, and so certainly the opportunity is there. How to find your way? It's the market. I don't know at all. Frankly, I can't say anything about it. But
again, flexibility is very important. If you want to work as a literary translator. Maybe you will not. It will not be enough for your living. So try to find solutions that are kind of in between and continue doing this for your own, development and pleasure. So this is very, but definitely all of this, all those sectors are worthwhile at one point being investigated. So do we have other question?
Not for the moment. Maybe we skipped a few because everybody was saying how great we look and how well they can hear us. And thanks for these compliments. Actually, they gave us great.
Like this. So
they give us great pleasure.
We're
yes.
trying to use very complicated headsets at one point.
Literary translation, we handle that. Is there who for translators specializing in culture tourism, which is sort of the same the same point. Maybe with tourism, if you look at sort of some of the analysis that's being made on the sector all in all. You have these sort of verticals where people say, oh, there's a huge growth in such and such, and then tourism is always last couple of years is seen as one that is not growing particularly well, maybe because as a result of COVID and what have you. But that might be. But
the cultural, so always the tip we want to give here is, when you ask a question about one specific sector, I'm trying to find a way to make it more modern. For example, for the cultural and tourism industry. Now, you have to know that there are a lot of translating involving a search engine optimization, probably for hotel reviews. So this is something you could also invest in if you want to work in the cultural and tourism sector. Then, because try to get a training about search engine optimization, injection of keywords in the translation, because we are looking for this kind of specialist is a translator who is going to translate a marketing material for tourism or culture, but with in view in their mind the fact that it needs to be promoted in the internet and it needs to show well in an engine in a search engine in Google, for example. So this is very interesting. So search engine optimization, hotel reviews. So I mean, of course, you would need some training about this, but it's still something that a lot of translators are turning to simply because it gives them another way of collaborating with companies, and they just add a competence to their to their career.
And SEO is not something that he has to learn. Eh?
No, absolutely
it's not the end of the world. I mean, it looks a bit, let's say, prohibitive from the outside, but it's just a few things, and you get into it, etc., etc. These are things that are manageable. This is not about taking an extra master's degree, right?
Let's go also to something very modern. Most of you are young, so you use social media, you use social networks. You have to know that we have for some clients in the marketing, we actually, what we do is that we audit for example, the social media of some influencers that are working for a brand. So in this case, it's very interesting because, I mean, for example, a brand wants to be promoted, I don't know, in Estonia, and then they work with an influencer, with an Instagram influencer, for example. Then we would have linguists who have an interest. It's always, the point is, be interested in something. If you are interested in this, then they will go through all the posts and then do an analysis. Is there like offensive language being used? Are they conveying messages that are not, let's say, in line with the brand? So this is something that we use as in the marketing, in the translation marketing market.
Yeah, there was a question here. Is it better to start working with a translation agency or as end clients? At the owner of a translation agency, I would say work with the translation agency. And I'm not saying this to joke. I think what you will have with the translation agency is a greater array, a greater variability of files that you will get in front of you. Typically, you will not work for one translation agency. You will work for a couple, 2, 3, whatever. That's up to you to decide, but certainly more than one. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And at least in as much as you will specialize in a certain, specialized, if you will go for a certain sector, if you say I do legal translation between English and French, well, you will work for a couple of companies. There you will see more different types of work than if, for instance, you would just work for one law firm. See, that would be, I mean, my 2 cents.
Yeah, exactly. This question about working for, let's say, translation companies and being a freelancer is a fair one. So I think that what is the most important is how you actually see your role as being a freelancer. Is like you need to still consider that you are a freelancer completely working for yourself, meaning that when you deliver a translation, of course it will be project managed and reviewed by someone but you don't have to think about this, because I can tell you that, and I will be a little bit disruptive here. For me, translation is the translator's work at 95% quality. So quality itself is of humongous importance. If a translation from a translator is not up to standards and is less than 95%, we have a problem with the review. We have to say that the reviewer will not invest the same time that the translator needs to invest for research of work, and then that's the problem. So if you want to work with a translation company, there is one advantage. If you are a good translator and you are an honest translator, you will get a lot of work from the company. So you will have a secure stream of business from the company. So this is one advantage, obviously. The second advantage is that you're not the only one. Okay, you work as if you are the only one, but you know that just in case, you have your 2% error percentage per day, someone after you will fix this and will give you a feedback. You have a feedback when you work for yourself and for your sometimes or with a customer. The customer, most of the time, they won't say anything if it's good, or if there is very bad, they will tell you. They won't pay you. But I mean, it's very important for you to know what kind of service you give. What you give. So for me, I am when I was a freelancer, I used to work with 2 or 3 companies, and then I have direct customers in the area of, that were interesting for me. Like again, it was environmental policy. So, but this is very important. There was a question also about mixing interpretation.
Yeah, that's one. That's one I was looking at.
Interpretation and translation. Very interesting. I did this at the beginning of my career, and to be honest, I'm not a super fan of it because. Well, this is my view. Okay?
Sure.
Because
that's why we're here.
Interpretation is a very demanding, stressful work, and in order to be, let's say, completely fluent and experienced, you need to do it a lot. You need to have hours and hours of interpretation. For example, if you want to work as an interpreter for the European Commission or for the UN, you need to have a track record of, 3,000 hours of interpretation. I mean, it's not exactly it's just an example, but there is a track record you need to show. And translation, it takes more time to be experienced because it's another type of work. Is more you go in depth. For interpretation, you need to be quick and good. For translation, you can have the luxury sometimes to go back to your translation, sleep on it, and then. So for me, I think, and also it's a question of availability. If you work for customers, be like companies, or you need, of course, you're not tied to them. But if you always say, I'm not available because I'm on interpretation, they will not call you back.
Exactly.
And it's no offense at all and no problem at all. But it's the fact that when we work with customers, we rely on a certain availability because we want to make sure that, for example, if you translated something for one of my customers and he was happy with this, I want you to do the same translation for the same, let's say, client over time. So you will become an expert in this. So I'm not saying that you have to be available. Absolutely, you're free to not to be available. But if you have several jobs, it's difficult to do them well.
Yeah, jack of all trades, master of none. Yeah.
I might be,
No.
wrong.
We're just giving our personal opinions, Claudio, just for to give some color to the people. What kind of translation jobs can you earn enough money to live well? I think we talked about this earlier. In an earlier part of your career, you have to build it up. We made a comparison with other professions. Frankly, no disrespect, but I would leave it at that. We're studying international and European relations, says Panagiota, but would like to do a master in translation. In your opinion, is this possible? Will I face difficulties because my first degree doesn't belong to the linguistic sector?
No, it's not a real problem. Depends, the country you are studying in, and because for example, here in Belgium, if you have a low degree, you can have you can afterwards study translation, and they will see what kind of courses you add, like the general courses, and maybe you will skip 1 year. So it's still possible, of course, but studying international interpretation and relation is a very interesting addition to translation, especially if you work for the public sector. I mean, it's because again, this is my bread and butter. I work mainly with public sector clients, and there's a way of, especially if you work with the European institutions, there is a way of translating. There is a way of, let's say, conveying messages it's and then you learn it with time. But the background as international relation, is very good, especially if you want to start a translation career. Obviously, there is a possibility, I think, to switch. I wouldn't tell you, if you need to go to do it from scratch, but still.
What type of stuff? Finding work as a freelancer? I think we covered that mostly. Let me see whether there's other questions or other topics that we have not covered yet. There are many opportunities to learn translation. I think in the environment that we are here, having a master's in translation makes a big difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So that's really the sort of the gold standard, I believe, that we believe in our profession. Certainly in my company, this is one that we start from. There are exceptions, of course. There's a doctor who works for us, for instance, on very particular things. But, the standard is that there is a master's degree in translation and that, the native speaker, etc., that all comes with it.
But in Europe, most of translation curricula also include interpretation. Okay, but at one point you will need to choose. In general, the first bachelor degree will be more general translation. Then afterwards, you want to specialize in interpretation. But it's still, you find the same. Of course, the opportunity to learn. Okay, but it's true that for let's say ongoing training after being graduated, there is less practice in interpretation because it's a living. It's a living task. You know what I mean? So I think that probably the International Federation of Translation and Linguists, you can help finding opportunities to learn. Probably yes.
Let me maybe address the question by Els Jacobs. It is said that translation agencies don't pay a lot. Okay, right. Well, I own a company, so I have to deal with this every day, and I'm sure the Claudio is just the same. It is a competitive market. It is a profession which I have found, again, coming from elsewhere, that is not regulated, that is not like lawyers or keepers. There is a culture also, a culture from, and it starts at the very beginning. I will give my point with a little anecdote. I was attending a conference at the Belgian University with the translations. I'm not going to say who was in the room. There's other people that are, very well known in the industry. And the professors there, I'm not even going to say what university it was, but it was in Flanders. And they said, oh, we do something really, really interesting. And we do lots of translation work for city such and such. And we do this. And I said, okay, and how much do you charge for this? And they said, no, we do this for free because we think it's interesting, etc., etc. There is, and I told them, do you think that lawyers would make the same error? Do you think that lawyers would do things for free, even if they are still, being trained? Of course not. They're lawyers. That was the answer that came immediately. And I sort of got on my horse and I said, okay, well, this is complete. This is, pardon my French here, but this is bullshit. This just doesn't work. Why do you take pleasure in doing things for free and then complain afterwards that the compensation levels in our industry are not high enough? I think everybody in the industry needs to stand up and defend the quality that they produce. Quite often they do produce that. There are exceptions, but that's for everybody actually to defend that. And I can tell you, in my company, and I speak for many others in the industry, we defend that every day. But everybody needs to hang together on that. I have seen that there is, and quite often, you make an offer for something, let's say for 2,000 euros, and then a client comes back, oh, that's not what I can do it for 1,200. Okay, that happens every day. But it's for all of us to stand up on that and to defend the quality that we deliver. There is no lawyer, there is no bookkeeper that would commit the errors that are being committed in our industry every day. And I have extremely strong feelings on that, frankly.
To be honest, it's a good question. Yeah. It's a fair question, and I totally agree. As I was telling you, as a freelancer now, if I were a freelancer compared to 20 years ago, I would charge less my customer because it used to be a market where translation were paid more from the customer. Let's not forget that when a freelance translator receiving work for a translation from a translation company, the translation company receive works from a customer. If the customer puts pressure, and this is what has been, happening over the last 10 years, more with globalization, price have dropped. So even multi-million-dollar contracts, have been reduced in price. So this is the only possibility is for the customer to realize that. And at one point, then it will be cyclical, but it will never go back the same way. Never, 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 because there is globalization. Globalization, things go faster, and we translate more and more.
Yeah.
But price have been reduced a lot, so this needs to be in somewhat, let's say, repercuted in the rates freelance interpreter translators are asking. But I can tell you that ethics is very important, especially when we work in specific sector like public sector or finance or life science, where there is a real importance for accuracy. We're trying to find the fair rate, okay? And it's always open for discussion for good translators who are doing their job very honestly, with a good commitment. You know, there is a possibility. There is always a possibility to discuss. There is always a possibility to find ways to interact and to gain, like maybe trainings or whatever. But it's true that, you know, it's not that translations pay less. They pay the market is cheaper at the worldwide level.
Yeah, but still, I mean, there is room out there also to. I mean, we are increasing our prices now in our company. And we've been doing that, and you know the volumes are still the same. So it is possible, but it's hard work, and you have to defend it, and you have to stand for it every day. I see that the moderator Lucas intervenes and say, "Well, we're getting close to the to 7 o'clock. Actually, we are 7 o'clock exactly." You wanted to point us to a Slido, Lucas, so I'll leave the floor to you for a minute, and then maybe you and I, Claudio, have some last words of wisdom in order to close this decently. Lucas, over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Geert and Claudio. That was an excellent talk with very fun and slightly controversial points at the end. I can't say that I find anything to disagree with. On the contrary. For all the guests, I hope you enjoyed the session too. And I would like to invite you to go to slido.com and use the code 2022 TEF Online 2, which is in the chat, where you can write to us what was your main takeaway from this session. Now, this is all from me. Thank you very much. And back to you, Geert.
Let's first unmute, and it's much better. It's certainly been a pleasure to be with all of you. I see there's 155 people in the forum right now. So thanks for your contribution. Certainly thanks for the questions, because that's the raw material that we need as moderators here. Claudio?
Yeah, again, it was really a pleasure. It's not the first time, you know, we've been organizing this conference for 9 years now, and it's always a very nice atmosphere. And I think that if you want, you know, to follow up whatever, feel free to contact me. But again, I want to be very optimistic with the, you know, and with an optimistic note. I really think that there is room and opportunities for everybody. Invest your time in, you know, training yourself. Try to specialize as much as possible, and really, I think we are working in a beautiful profession. And then I'm sure that everybody, when you meet friends or when people, you know, what do you do for like environment transit? Oh wow, it's always like, you know, something like a very exceptional. I think we need to keep this exceptional part of our business and of our industry. Thank you very much for your time, and thanks for attending this session.
See you soon. Have a good evening, everybody. Bye-bye.